Coming up on FYI, what's happening in the Middle East? We look into green energy and a new technology that could tidy up space. Here on FYI, we help you make sense of the world. And right now there's a lot of fighting and upsetting news from the Middle East. So what's happening? Well, the latest fighting is taking place here, in the countries of Lebanon and Israel. The conflict is between Israel and an armed group based in Lebanon called Hezbollah. Hezbollah are supporters of the Palestinian militant group, Hamas, who are based in Gaza and who Israel have been at war with for the past year.
It began on the 7th of October 2023, when armed Hamas fighters breached border fences and launched a devastating surprise attack on Israel, targeting civilians as well as soldiers. Thousands of rockets were fired, more than 1,000 Israelis were killed, and around 250 hostages were seized. In the war that followed, around 40,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza.
Both Hamas and Hezbollah are banned in Britain as terrorist organisations. Since last October, Hezbollah has fired thousands of rockets into Israel, and around 100,000 Israelis living in the north of the country have had to flee their homes, leaving ghost towns behind. In recent weeks, the fighting has escalated, including Israeli airstrikes on the Lebanese capital, Beirut. One of them killed Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah. The Israeli army has now crossed the border into Lebanon and has been fighting with Hezbollah on the ground. Sadly, fighting in the Middle East is not unusual, and it's all down to land. Both Hamas and Hezbollah are fighting for a separate Palestinian state that would include at least some land currently occupied by Israel. The country of Iran supports the terrorist groups, and this week fired lots of missiles into Israel. Most were shot down without causing major damage.
Make no mistake, Britain stands full square.
The UK government and other world leaders are calling for a ceasefire in the latest fighting in Lebanon, where many have died, and at the time of recording, thousands have been forced to leave their homes to escape the violence. Like 9-year-old Celia, who had to flee her family home and is now staying with her grandmother.
I came here because I was terrified of the war. They're bombing heavily. I wish they wouldn't bomb. When will this war stop?
Charities are warning of the devastating effects the conflict is having on children and families.
We know that 1 million people, which is quite a lot of the population of Lebanon, have moved in the last week to try and find somewhere safe. Some people are going to the homes of other friends or family in different parts of the country that are not being affected. Other people are going to shelters that are set up by the government to help protect people. These shelters are often schools, so where the children used to learn, they're now going there to live. And sometimes there can be as many as 20 people living in one classroom, which is a lot when you know how big your classroom is.
We also heard from Ishai, a teenager living near Jerusalem in Israel.
He's part of a charity called Jerusalem Peace Builders, who bring young people from both Palestinian and Jewish communities together.
After living with war for a year, he told us he just wants peace in his country. He wanted to remain anonymous for his safety.
It makes me feel scared for the people I love, for the people who are fighting in the north or in the south in Lebanon. I want my people in my country to have a simple life. A peaceful life is not taken for granted in Israel. You have to constantly live in fear of what's coming next, the next threat, the next war. And I want to live in peace and to live that I know that I'm safe.
For more information on the conflict and the history behind it, go to our website, first.news/FYI.
Now, on FYI, every week we like to investigate possible fake news. So, can you work out if this next story is fake news or fact? We came across this video being widely shared online. It shows a man holding a giant Maine Coon cat and it's received thousands of likes. Now, we know that Maine Coons are a very big breed of cats, but is this one real? We'll let you know later in the show. There's been massive news in the UK this week. For almost 150 years, we've burned coal to generate electricity. But now, the last coal-fired power station in the country has shut down. It's a big deal, and it shows how the UK wants to shift to producing electricity from renewable green energy. But what is green energy, and why is it better than coal? Well, I've been looking into it.
Have you ever thought about how much energy we use? Whether it's watching cat videos on our phones, buying a burger from a takeaway, or going somewhere in the car. Pretty much everything we do involves energy. But where does it all come from? Well, I've been checking this out. For most of human history, our energy use has been pretty low. But over the last 100 years or so, it's skyrocketed. Quite literally. At the moment, most of the energy we use comes from things like gas, oil, and coal. They're often called fossil fuels because they come from the remains of prehistoric plants and animals. These remains contain carbon, which when we bring it up from underground, can be burnt to make energy and fuel. Imagine that, we're using dead dinosaurs to move all our stuff around and generate electricity. Crazy! But burning fossil fuels also sends harmful gases into the atmosphere, causing our climate to change. Luckily though, there's another type of energy, called green energy or renewable energy. It creates electricity using wind turbines and solar panels, which use the heat of the sun. Plus, there's also hydropower, created by the flow of water in rivers and oceans. The good thing is, these forms of energy aren't as harmful for the environment. But that doesn't mean there aren't some challenges. For example, what happens when the wind isn't blowing? And what if there's no sunshine, like at nighttime? Well, let's talk to an expert, one of the UK's green energy pioneers, Dale Vince. Hi Dale, so can you solve some of these problems for us? Are wind turbines any good when the wind isn't blowing?
Well, it's a good question and a funny one because obviously windmills, as I prefer to call them, don't go around when there's no wind, but it's not such a big problem. That doesn't happen very often. And when it does, we have big cables connecting the countries of Europe and we can take electricity from somewhere where it is windy and give it back when we have the wind and they don't.
And what about all the steel in wind turbines? Doesn't that have to be made with fossil fuels?
Another good question. Wind turbines are made from steel and concrete. Most things are today, but that's not the problem that it might appear to be, because if you look at the carbon cost of all of those materials, when you put up one windmill, within 6 months, you've got that back through carbon savings. And for the next 30 years, you make a net saving of carbon. And steel is beginning to be made without fossil fuels as well.
But what about solar panels when there's no sunlight?
Of course, solar panels don't work when there's no sun at night time, but that's not such a big problem. People on their homes today are putting in batteries and solar panels so that when they make energy during the day that they don't need, they can keep it and use it at night.
So which country is doing the best with renewable energy? Well, I've been looking into this, and let's see if you can guess from these four which one it is. Is it the UK, the USA, Norway, or India? Well, the answer is Norway. Nearly all of its electricity comes from hydropower, created by water flowing down steep valleys from its high mountains. And guess what? They're exporting some of their hydropower to the UK, using giant wires across the North Sea. So Dale, could we be doing more in the UK to make sure that we don't use fossil fuels?
Absolutely. There's two things we could do here. One is to use less energy. We can probably save 20 to 25% at home by turning things off, turning things down like thermostats. And meanwhile, we've got 50% green electricity on the grid. We could get to 100% in about 10 years. We have enough wind and sun to power the whole country nearly 20 times over.
And what about innovations for the future?
So we have a new way to make electricity, something called a tidal lagoon, using underwater propellers, driving generators. That looks really exciting. But up until now, we've only been talking about electricity. We also use a lot of fossil fuel gas to heat our homes and run businesses. We've found a new way to make that gas from grass. And we have enough grass in the country to make all of the gas that we need so that we can free ourselves from fossil gas completely.
Thank you, Dale.
That was my pleasure. Thank you.
So it seems like green energy really is the way forward if we want to protect our planet. And before too long, the fossil fuels that we rely on at the moment will become a thing of the past, just like dinosaurs.
For more explainers on loads of big issues, just head to our website, first.news/FYI. We love these photos that have been selected as finalists for the Nikon Comedy Wildlife Photography Awards. All the photos are so good, from this sassy praying mantis to an awkward smiley frog. But I think my personal favourite is this stuck squirrel. The winner of the awards will be announced at the end of the year. Good luck to everyone! We know that pollution and waste is a big problem here on Earth. But did you know there's also a massive waste crisis up in space? We heard about a new solution to try and tackle the problem. Here's Braden with more info.
Jupiter C rocket is ready for America's second attempt to launch a space satellite.
3, 2, 1.
Since the 1950s, we've been launching rockets and satellites, and many of them are still up there. Right now, over 16,800 satellites are orbiting Earth. Many are old and no longer work, turning into what's called space debris. But it's not just the whole satellites. There are over 35,000 pieces of debris from broken up spacecraft. These fragments, travelling at speeds of up to 17,500 miles an hour, are a real danger to the satellites we rely on for everyday things like the signal for our phones, and they're even a danger to the astronauts on the International Space Station.
Well, I'm here at a company called Astroscale in Harwell, Oxford, where a potential solution to the problem is being built.
The solution? A satellite designed to clean up space debris.
But to get a closer look, I've got to suit up. I'm going to step inside the clean room.
Now, what exactly is a clean room, might you ask?
It's a specially controlled environment where all pollutants like dust and airborne microbes are kept to an absolute minimum. This is because even the tiniest particle can cause problems when creating something as delicate and precise as a satellite. So this is it, this is the one.
And it's in this clean room where they're building individual parts of the satellite. Meki, one of the scientists on the project, has allowed me to get a closer look at some of these parts.
So this is actually could be part of what we're talking about, of a satellite. I imagine it to be quite heavy, but it's super light.
Yeah, so ultimately, the lighter a satellite is, the better, because then it requires less fuel to actually get it up into orbit.
I'm very interested in the case here. What is in this case?
So, in this case, we have one of the docking plates, and what this would do is, we would want this to be attached on to all satellites that launch in the future.
If other satellites are fitted with the special docking plate, it will allow the ELSA-M spacecraft to easily attach and collect the satellites when they no longer work. It will then bring them down to the Earth's atmosphere, where they'll be safely burnt up. But what about all the other satellites and bits of debris that are already up there?
So, as you know, there's thousands of pieces of debris that don't have this kind of a docking plate on. We are developing an alternative satellite wherein there's a robotic arm attached to the satellite. So then it can go up into orbit and then safely grapple onto it with the robotic arm and remove it in a similar way.
So how critical is it that we act now and we make sure these satellites are getting up into space?
So critical. So the number of objects that are being launched into orbit is growing rapidly. Last year, there were 3,000 satellites launched into orbit, and before the end of the decade, there's expected to be a further 60,000. So if we keep going like this, orbital environment may become unusable. There's this scary theory called the Kessler syndrome, which says that when the orbital environment is so populated, one collision with a piece of debris would then create fragments of debris, which could then cause a further collision, and this happens in a snowball type effect. So we need to act now so we don't get to that type of a situation.
There's still quite a bit of work to do on the satellite, but they plan to launch and begin removing space debris as soon as 2027, with more and more new satellites being fitted with the special docking plate.
So, what did you make of this video being shared of a guy holding a giant Maine Coon cat? Well, it's fake news. The video was made by digital artist Numan Khan using artificial intelligence. A real Maine Coon cat is big, but not this big. A telltale sign of AI in this video is the plastic bag moving a bit weirdly in the background. See? Newman's social media account is full of amazingly real-looking videos. And though he clearly labels his videos as AI art, some people who share them don't. And that's when people might mistakenly think they're real. Well, that's about it from us, but we'll see you next week with more top news stories.